The courtroom was alive with a mixture of tension and curiosity. People shuffled in their seats, murmuring quietly to each other, the kind of low hum that filled every serious place where justice was supposed to be served. At the center of it, all behind the long wooden desks and polished floors, sat the judge, a man who had seen countless cases and thought he had seen everything. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and his expression rarely betrayed any emotion. But today, a flicker of amusement crossed his face as he looked toward the entrance. Through the tall wooden doors, a teenager entered. He walked in with a calm confidence that was unusual for someone his age, carrying a small, slightly worn briefcase in one hand. His suit, though clearly too big for him, hung neatly around his shoulders, giving him an air of awkward dignity. He did not fidget or glance around nervously as most young people might. Instead, he moved with a sense of purpose, his gaze steady and eyes bright with focus. The judge's lips curved into a faint smirk almost involuntarily. "Well, this is new," he muttered under his breath. Around him, the courtroom staff and the audience noticed his reaction, some turning to glance at the young boy with curiosity. A few people even whispered, trying to catch a better look. The boy seemed almost out of place, like a miniature figure in a world made for adults. Yet there was something undeniably commanding about the way he carried himself. As he approached the front, some of the attorneys raised their eyebrows, exchanging subtle glances that said, without words, "Who is this kid?" The courtroom was a stage of silent judgment, the air thick with expectations and preconceived notions. Many were ready to dismiss him as an amusing interruption, a child playing at being grown up. But there was an edge to his composure that caused a ripple of unease. He walked to the designated spot, placing his briefcase neatly on the floor beside him. He took a deep breath, standing upright, hands at his sides, and looked directly at the judge. The judge's smirk widened slightly, though now it was tinged with a hint of condescension. "And who might you be?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of authority mixed with incredulity. "I am here to represent my client," the teenager replied, his voice steady, clear, and surprisingly confident. There was no quiver, no sign of nervousness. The courtroom went quiet, everyone trying to process the words that came from someone so young. Murmurs faded into a tense silence as the weight of his declaration settled into the room. The judge leaned back slightly, folding his hands over his chest. He tilted his head, peering at the teenager as if trying to read a book written in a language he did not understand. "A teenager representing a client, are you serious?" His tone was a mix of disbelief and mockery. Laughter rippled quietly through the courtroom, subtle at first, but growing as people tried to absorb the absurdity of the situation. The teenager's eyes never wavered. He took a small step forward, glancing briefly at his briefcase as if drawing energy from it, and then met the judge's gaze directly. "I am serious, Your Honor. I am fully prepared to present my case and uphold the law to the best of my abilities." His words were measured, deliberate, and carried a weight far beyond his years. The courtroom's laughter slowly died down, replaced by whispers of curiosity and astonishment. Some of the adult lawyers in the room shared skeptical looks, their minds racing to imagine the possibility that a child could stand before them and argue a case effectively. A few older spectators shook their heads subtly, some even smiling in disbelief. It was a strange sight, a teenager standing firm in a courtroom, and yet there was something undeniably magnetic about his presence. The confidence he radiated made it difficult to dismiss him outright. The judge's amusement turned into something more complicated. He felt a strange mix of irritation and curiosity. He was used to controlling the room with a raised voice or a sharp word, but this teenager did not seem intimidated in the slightest. The boy's calm demeanor challenged the usual dynamics of authority, and for the first time in many years, the judge felt a twinge of uncertainty. The courtroom staff tried to maintain decorum, though their eyes kept darting toward the teenager, trying to anticipate what he would do next. The air was thick with expectation, and it was clear that everyone present sensed something unusual was about to unfold. People had assumed this would be a brief moment of comic relief, a child fumbling through adult responsibilities, but there was a growing sense that this assumption might be entirely wrong. The teenager opened his briefcase briefly, revealing neatly organized documents, folders, and a few legal books. He did not make a show of it, but the careful arrangement spoke volumes about his preparation and discipline. Every movement was deliberate, every glance intentional. It was clear that this was no ordinary teen trying to play a role. He was serious, and he had spent time preparing for this moment. As he arranged his papers, the judge watched intently, his previous smirk fading. There was a subtle shift in the room. The whispers grew softer, replaced by a focused silence as the audience tried to read the boy's intentions. The weight of the situation began to settle in. This was no longer a mere amusement. This was something different, something challenging to the conventional expectations of age and ability. The judge finally cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Very well, let us see what you can do. Begin your opening statement." He said it in a tone that was both commanding and slightly skeptical, as if expecting the teenager to falter at any moment. The teenager nodded slightly and stepped forward. He looked at each person in the courtroom, not missing a single detail, his eyes calm yet perceptive. Then he began to speak. His voice was steady, articulate, and surprisingly mature. He outlined the key points of the case with clarity, using simple but precise language that left no room for misunderstanding. Each word was deliberate, each point backed by logic and careful thought. As he continued, the judge found himself leaning forward slightly, listening more intently than he had in years. The courtroom, once filled with soft chuckles and murmurs, was now completely silent. Every person present was captivated by the unexpected display of skill and knowledge. There was no hesitation, no nervous stammering, no childish mistakes. It was as if a seasoned attorney had stepped into the courtroom, disguised in youthful form. The teenager concluded his initial statement and stepped back slightly, hands calmly resting at his sides. The silence lingered for a moment before the judge finally spoke, his voice a mixture of surprise and newfound respect. "Very well, we will proceed." The courtroom felt the shift immediately. The dynamic had changed. The boy had commanded the attention and respect of everyone present, not through age or title, but through skill, preparation, and confidence. As the case began, the teenager's focus never wavered. He listened carefully, responded thoughtfully, and demonstrated an understanding of legal principles that went far beyond what anyone expected. It was clear to everyone, including the judge, that this was no ordinary teenager. This was someone extraordinary, someone who would challenge every assumption and expectation. Even as the trial progressed, with witnesses and opposing counsel presenting their arguments, the teenager remained composed, analyzing every detail and responding with precision. His presence alone seemed to influence the energy of the room, turning skepticism into cautious curiosity and amusement into genuine respect. The courtroom, once filled with doubt, was now filled with anticipation. People leaned forward in their seats, eager to see what this young attorney would do next. By the end of the day, the first impression had shifted dramatically. What began as a moment of amusement and mockery had transformed into something remarkable. The judge, who had initially doubted and ridiculed him, now observed with a mixture of awe and wariness. The courtroom had witnessed the beginning of an extraordinary story, a story that would challenge perceptions, expectations, and the very idea of what a teenager was capable of achieving. The teenager gathered his briefcase, stood tall, and gave a small nod, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. He had made his point, not through arrogance, but through quiet confidence, preparation, and intelligence. And as he stepped out of the courtroom doors, there was a shared understanding among everyone present that they had just witnessed the arrival of someone truly exceptional, someone whose abilities could not be judged by age, appearance, or expectations. The first chapter of his remarkable journey had begun, and it was already impossible to forget. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The previous day's events had spread quickly. Everyone who had witnessed the teenager's composure and knowledge was eager to see what would happen next. The room was packed, and the murmurs of curious spectators mixed with the soft scratching of pens as reporters and lawyers prepared to take notes. The air was charged with expectation, and for the first time, The judge appeared less certain of what to expect. As the doors opened, the teenager entered, carrying his briefcase as always, moving with the same calm confidence that had surprised everyone the day before. There was no hesitance in his step, no glance around seeking approval. He was there, for one purpose, and that purpose was clear in the way he held himself. The audience watched him with wide eyes, some leaning forward in their seats, intrigued by the unusual figure at the front of the courtroom. The judge, sitting tall in his chair, observed him carefully. A faint smirk lingered on his lips, but it was now mixed with curiosity and an underlying tension. He had mocked the boy yesterday, assuming that his youth would show through in mistakes or nervousness. But the teenager had handled everything with skill and poise. The judge wondered silently if he had misjudged him entirely. This thought made him uneasy, as he was used to holding complete control in his courtroom. "Are you ready to continue?" the judge asked, his tone still carrying the faint trace of disbelief from yesterday. The teenager nodded once without hesitation. "Yes, Your Honor. I am prepared." The judge leaned back, watching closely, trying to detect even the slightest sign of weakness. He wanted to catch the boy off guard, to see if his confidence was a mask or genuine skill. The courtroom, meanwhile, remained silent, all eyes fixed on the young attorney, eager to witness the next moment in this unfolding drama. The opposing counsel began by presenting the first witness. The teenager listened carefully, making subtle notes as the witness spoke. He didn't interrupt or fidget. He was completely focused, absorbing every detail, every inconsistency. His attention to detail was remarkable, and it became immediately clear that he was not just participating for show, he was analyzing the case like a seasoned professional. When the teenager stood to cross-examine the witness, a hush fell over the room. His movements were deliberate, his voice steady, and every question he asked was precise and well-considered. He probed gently, drawing out details that the witness had overlooked, and he never seemed impatient or flustered. Each answer he elicited added depth to the case, and the audience watched in awe as he navigated the complexities of the testimony with ease. The judge's expression shifted throughout this process. His initial amusement faded, replaced by a mixture of intrigue and cautious respect. He had expected the teenager to stumble, to falter, but instead the boy demonstrated an understanding of legal procedure and strategy that far exceeded his age. The judge found himself listening intently, noting the careful phrasing of questions, the logical flow of arguments, and the subtle persuasive techniques employed. Lawyers in the courtroom were equally astonished. Many of them had initially dismissed the teenager, thinking him unprepared or inexperienced. Yet now they exchanged quiet, astonished glances. It was clear that the boy had studied every aspect of the case meticulously, anticipating counter-arguments and planning his responses with extraordinary precision. His knowledge of the law was evident not just in the facts he cited, but in the way he presented his reasoning, logically and convincingly. As the examination continued, the teenager demonstrated an ability to remain composed under pressure. The witness tried to challenge him, offering vague or misleading responses, but the teenager remained calm, guiding the witness back to the point with patience and clarity. He never raised his voice, never displayed frustration, and yet his control of the situation was absolute. The audience began to sense that this young attorney was not just competent. He was exceptional. The judge, now fully attentive, leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed as he observed the interaction, a mixture of astonishment and caution crossing his face. He had underestimated the teenager, and he recognized it. The courtroom's energy shifted from curiosity to admiration, and even the most skeptical observers found themselves captivated by the young attorney's skill. Midway through the day, the teenager was faced with a particularly complex legal argument from the opposing counsel. The lawyer attempted to intimidate him, using technical language and rapid questioning, hoping to catch him off guard. Yet the teenager responded calmly, dissecting each point methodically. He referenced statutes and precedents, explaining his reasoning in simple, understandable terms that even the laypersons in the courtroom could follow. His ability to simplify complex concepts without losing accuracy was impressive and demonstrated a rare combination of intelligence and communication skill. The judge watched silently, realizing that this teenager was not only knowledgeable, but also exceptionally strategic. The boy seemed to anticipate the flow of arguments, countering points before they became a real challenge. The courtroom, which had been tense and uncertain in the morning, was now completely captivated. Every movement, every word of the teenager commanded attention and respect. During a short break, whispers filled the hallways outside the courtroom. Spectators, reporters, and even lawyers discussed the young attorney in hushed tones, marveling at his abilities. People speculated about his background, wondering how someone so young could possess such deep legal knowledge and such a remarkable presence in a courtroom. No one could quite explain it, but everyone agreed on one thing. They were witnessing something extraordinary. When the trial resumed, the teenager continued with his methodical approach. He listened carefully to every argument, responded with logical precision, and never allowed his composure to falter. Even the judge, who had initially tried to find flaws or weaknesses, found it increasingly difficult to challenge him. Each time the judge thought he might have the upper hand, the teenager anticipated the move, presenting his points clearly and convincingly. By the end of the day, it was undeniable that the teenager had completely transformed the courtroom dynamics. The judge, the lawyers, the witnesses, and the audience had all witnessed a young individual demonstrating skill, intelligence, and maturity far beyond his years. What began as a scene of mockery and disbelief had evolved into an astonishing display of legal acumen and calm authority. The teenager gathered his documents, placed them carefully back into his briefcase, and offered a polite nod to the judge. He had made his presence felt, not through arrogance but through quiet determination and exceptional skill. The courtroom, which had expected entertainment, had instead experienced a masterclass in composure, strategy, and legal expertise. As he left the courtroom, the whispers and astonished glances followed him. People were eager to see what would happen next, realizing that the events of this day were only part of a much larger story. The teenager's abilities had not just challenged expectations, they had reshaped them. The audience understood that they were witnessing the rise of a young attorney, whose talent could not be underestimated, whose journey would be followed with keen interest, and whose story promised even greater revelations in the days to come. The courtroom was unusually quiet as the teenager entered on the third day of the proceedings. The air was thick with curiosity and anticipation. Everyone had been talking about his performance the previous day. The audience, lawyers, and even the judge could not forget how confidently he had handled the case. Today, the energy was different. There was a mix of expectation, tension, and awe. The teenager walked to his place with his usual calmness, briefcase in hand. He did not look around nervously or fidget as many young people might. His steps were steady, confident, and deliberate. The judge, sitting high in his chair, could not hide the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He had been skeptical at first, ready to mock or belittle, but the teenager had proven him wrong in ways that left him both unsettled and intrigued. The day began with the continuation of witness testimonies. The teenager listened intently, making quick notes, eyes flicking between the witness, the lawyers, and the judge. It was clear he was analyzing everything, not just listening. He noticed inconsistencies in statements, subtle cues, and overlooked details. His mind worked fast, piecing together information with precision that left observers amazed. When it was his turn to question the witness, he stood with calm authority. His voice was clear, each word deliberate, carrying both confidence and patience. He asked questions that drew out critical details, the kind of questions that seasoned attorneys might take years to perfect. The witness, initially confident, found himself carefully considering each response. As the teenager skillfully led the examination with a steady hand, the judge watched silently, leaning slightly forward. He could feel his own surprise growing. The teenager's ability to think on his feet, to analyze arguments, and to present questions with precision was nothing short of remarkable. The judge had expected hesitation, mistakes, or nervousness, but there was none. Only a quiet mastery of the courtroom, of logic, and of the law. The audience was captivated. People who had come expecting a novelty act found themselves witnessing a serious, highly skilled performance. Whispered conversations paused as spectators leaned forward to hear every word. Lawyers, who had initially dismissed him, exchanged astonished glances. The teenager was not just competent, he was exceptional. As the examination proceeded, The opposing counsel attempted a tricky line of questioning to test the teenager. He asked rapid, complex questions, hoping to corner the young attorney. But the teenager did not flinch. He answered each question methodically, calmly analyzing the implications and offering precise, clear responses. His ability to think strategically under pressure left everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, in quiet awe. After successfully handling the challenging witness, the teenager turned his attention to the next phase of the trial. He presented evidence that had been overlooked, pointing out connections and interpretations that even the opposing counsel had not considered. He explained the relevance in a way that was logical and persuasive, using simple yet powerful language. The courtroom listened with rapt attention, unable to ignore the intelligence and poise he displayed. During a brief recess, the courtroom staff and spectators discussed the unusual situation in low voices. Many were astonished at the teenager's skill, wondering how someone so young could possess such knowledge and composure. Even the lawyers, who prided themselves on experience, admitted quietly that they had underestimated him. The consensus was clear. This young person was extraordinary, and his abilities could not be dismissed. The trial resumed, and the teenager faced a particularly difficult moment. The opposing counsel presented a legal argument designed to confuse or intimidate. Most people would have stumbled under such pressure, but the teenager remained unfazed. He analyzed the argument, identified weaknesses, and responded with a calm, logical explanation. His reasoning was sound, his presentation clear, and his confidence unwavering. The judge, now fully attentive, listened carefully, recognizing the brilliance before him. As the day progressed, the teenager's performance continued to impress. He anticipated questions, presented arguments effectively, and maintained complete control of the courtroom atmosphere. Every step, every word, every gesture was deliberate, displaying skill far beyond his years. Witnesses answered carefully, lawyers adjusted their strategy, and even the audience remained fully engaged, aware they were watching something exceptional. The judge, who had once mocked the boy, now found himself deeply impressed. He had underestimated him, assuming youth equated to inexperience. But the teenager's mastery of the law, his calm, strategic thinking, and his eloquence left no room for doubt. The courtroom dynamics had shifted entirely. The teenager had moved from being an underdog to commanding respect and attention from everyone present. During a crucial argument, the teenager stood, addressing the courtroom with clear authority. He dissected a complex legal issue, explaining it logically and convincingly. Each statement he made was supported by evidence, precedent, and reasoning. The opposing counsel listened carefully, unable to dismiss the points. The judge nodded subtly, acknowledging the skill and preparation of the young attorney. The audience was silent, captivated by the unfolding mastery. No one laughed, no one whispered. Every eye was on the teenager, absorbing the clarity, intelligence, and focus he displayed. It was evident to everyone present that this was a person of extraordinary talent, someone who could think, analyze, and communicate at a level far beyond what his age suggested. By the end of the day, the courtroom had witnessed a transformation. The teenager had completely changed the perception of what was possible. What had begun as skepticism and mockery had turned into respect, curiosity, and astonishment. The judge, who had once doubted him, now regarded him with careful admiration, aware that he had underestimated someone truly exceptional. As the proceedings concluded for the day, the teenager gathered his briefcase, neatly organizing his papers with deliberate care. He gave a respectful nod to the judge, who returned it with a mixture of acknowledgement and amazement. The audience, lawyers, and staff recognized the significance of the day. They had witnessed not only skill and intelligence, but also composure, strategy, and an uncanny ability to command attention. Walking out of the courtroom, the teenager remained calm and focused. Whispers followed him, speculations about his background and abilities filling the hallways. People wondered how someone so young could possess such deep knowledge, such poise, and such a commanding presence. The impression he left was unforgettable. It was clear to all that this was not just a talented youth, but someone extraordinary, whose story would continue to unfold in remarkable ways. The day had proven beyond doubt that appearances could be deceiving, and true brilliance could come from the most unexpected places. The audience left with a sense of wonder, knowing that they had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for a long time. the third chapter of an extraordinary journey just beginning to reveal its full impact. The courtroom felt electric as the fourth day of the trial began. Word had spread throughout the city about the teenager who had amazed everyone with his skill, focus, and confidence. People crowded into the gallery, eager to see if the young attorney could continue to impress or if yesterday had been a fluke. The atmosphere was tense, but this tension carried a mix of excitement and anticipation rather than doubt. The teenager walked in as usual, carrying his small worn briefcase, his suit hanging neatly on his shoulders. His face was calm, his eyes focused, his movements deliberate. Everyone in the courtroom, from the judge to the reporters, could feel the quiet command he carried with him. It was a presence that demanded attention without demanding it, a rare blend of humility and authority. The judge, who had been skeptical and slightly mocking on the first day, now sat upright with a serious expression. He had seen the boy handle complex legal arguments, analyze evidence with precision, and maintain composure under pressure. Each day had peeled back another layer of the teenager's extraordinary abilities, leaving the judge both impressed and uneasy. He wondered what else this boy could do, what hidden depth of knowledge he possessed that had gone unseen until now. As the trial began, the teenager stood to present a critical argument. This was a pivotal moment, the kind that could sway the outcome of the case. His voice was steady, clear, and confident. He laid out his reasoning in a structured, logical way, referencing specific legal precedents and explaining their relevance. Each word he spoke carried weight, and the audience leaned forward, hanging on every sentence. Even the opposing counsel had to pause and consider his points carefully. During the presentation, subtle clues about the teenager's true identity began to emerge. He cited cases with the authority and familiarity of a seasoned attorney, not merely a student or prodigy. His ability to predict counterarguments, preemptively address objections, and guide the discussion strategically was unmatched. Observers started to sense that there was more to this young attorney than met the eye. A crucial moment arrived when the teenager challenged a key piece of evidence. He presented a detailed analysis that exposed inconsistencies in the opposing side's argument. He spoke with a calm intensity, his reasoning clear and precise. The judge, who had once doubted him, now listened intently, a mixture of astonishment and respect in his eyes. It was clear that the teenager was not just talented, he was extraordinary. As the courtroom absorbed this remarkable display, the teenager subtly revealed his credentials. He presented a legal document, showing his certification and authorization to practice law. The room fell silent. The murmurs and whispers that had filled the air just moments before stopped completely. Every eye turned to him, trying to process the revelation. The teenager was not just a brilliant student or an exceptionally prepared teen. He was, in fact, a fully qualified attorney who had been operating under a disguise to challenge perceptions and test the case. The judge's expression changed dramatically. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly agape as he struggled to process what he was seeing. The boy he had mocked, underestimated, and doubted was not only capable but already a professional in the field of law. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of astonishment, disbelief, and admiration. People whispered, gasped, and even laughed nervously, overwhelmed by the unexpected twist. The teenager remained composed as if nothing unusual had happened. He had anticipated the surprise, the reaction, and the attention. He calmly explained his reasons for the disguise, emphasizing that it was not meant to deceive maliciously, but to demonstrate that skill, intelligence, and capability are not determined by age or appearance. His explanation was eloquent, thoughtful, and persuasive. The judge leaned forward, finally speaking. His voice was calm but carried a tone of respect. "I admit I was wrong. I misjudged you based on appearances. Today, I see clearly that you are not only capable but extraordinary. Your actions have taught us all a valuable lesson." The audience, lawyers, and courtroom staff all nodded in agreement. The teenager's reveal had transformed the atmosphere. Skepticism had been replaced by admiration, mockery by respect. The courtroom had witnessed a rare demonstration of humility, intelligence, and strategic thinking combined with extraordinary legal skill. It was a moment that would be remembered for years. The rest of the day was focused on consolidating the case. The teenager guided the proceedings with unmatched clarity, presenting arguments, evidence, and interpretations with confidence and precision. Each step he took reinforced the respect and trust he had earned from everyone in the room. Witnesses responded carefully, lawyers adjusted their approaches, and the judge presided with newfound awareness of the boy's abilities. By the end of the day, the courtroom had shifted entirely. The teenager was no longer seen as a curiosity or a novelty. He was recognized as a skilled attorney, a master of strategy and logic, and a person of exceptional talent. The judge, who had once mocked him, publicly acknowledged his brilliance and offered a formal statement of respect. The audience left in awe, discussing the remarkable twist and the profound lesson that appearances can be deceiving. As the teenager packed his briefcase and walked out, he did so with quiet dignity. He had achieved more than winning a case or impressing a courtroom. He had challenged assumptions, demonstrated excellence, and reminded everyone that true talent is measured by action, skill, and integrity, not by age or outward appearances. The revelation of his identity marked a turning point in the trial, transforming it from a story of skepticism to one of respect, admiration, and unforgettable brilliance. The courtroom had witnessed a rare, extraordinary moment, one that would linger in memory long after the trial concluded. The fifth day of the trial began with a sense of calm authority in the courtroom that had been absent before. The teenager entered as he always did, carrying his small briefcase, standing tall and composed. The events of the previous days had left an indelible mark on everyone present. No longer were there whispers of skepticism or doubt. Instead, there was an air of respect and anticipation. Everyone in the courtroom understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary, and they leaned forward in their seats to see how the young attorney would bring the trial to its conclusion. The judge, who had once mocked and doubted the teenager, now sat with a composed expression, his eyes reflecting careful attention and acknowledgement. He understood that this trial had become more than a legal proceeding. It had become a lesson in humility, perception, and the extraordinary capacity of youth. The courtroom had been forever changed by the presence and skill of this young attorney. The teenager began by reviewing the key points of the case. His voice was calm, precise, and persuasive. He reminded the court of the evidence, the testimonies, and the arguments presented over the previous days. Every statement was clear, every fact meticulously connected to the legal framework of the case. His ability to organize complex information and present it in a way that was both understandable and compelling left no doubt in the minds of the audience and the judge that he was exceptionally prepared. He addressed the courtroom with a measured intensity, carefully analyzing the opposing counsel's arguments and systematically dismantling weak points. His questions and observations highlighted the critical details that had been overlooked and presented solutions or clarifications that strengthened his client's position. Even the opposing counsel could not help but listen intently, recognizing the depth of preparation and insight that the teenager displayed. The judge, observing closely, occasionally nodded in acknowledgement of particularly strong points. His tone when he spoke was measured and respectful, reflecting a change from the earlier days of skepticism and mockery. He asked clarifying questions not to challenge but to explore and understand the young attorney's perspective, showing that he now fully respected the skill and knowledge the teenager brought to the courtroom. As the trial progressed, the teenager demonstrated not only his legal skill but also his integrity and patience. He addressed all arguments fairly, did not belittle anyone, and remained composed even under pressure. Witnesses responded confidently, lawyers engaged thoughtfully, and the courtroom atmosphere became one of constructive engagement and respect. The teenager's ability to command attention without arrogance or intimidation created a sense of balance that was rare and inspiring. When it came time to deliver his closing argument, the teenager stood with calm authority, his briefcase beside him, his eyes scanning the courtroom to ensure every listener understood the points he would make. He summarized the key elements of the case, presented logical conclusions, and tied all the evidence together in a coherent and compelling manner. His language was simple yet effective, and he made sure that every listener could grasp the critical aspects of the arguments. The courtroom, now completely attentive, followed his words with fascination and admiration. The judge listened intently, fully aware of the extraordinary journey they had all witnessed over the past days. He had gone from mockery and doubt to respect and recognition. The teenager's dedication, intelligence, and careful strategy had left a lasting impression. The judge acknowledged, both inwardly and publicly, that he had underestimated the boy, and now he could not ignore the exceptional talent before him. As the teenager concluded, the room was silent for a moment, absorbing the clarity, precision, and calm authority of his presentation. Then a wave of acknowledgement spread. The judge spoke, his voice steady and filled with genuine respect. "I must recognize the extraordinary skill, preparation, and integrity demonstrated in this courtroom. It is clear that talent and knowledge are not determined by age, but by dedication, preparation, and insight. This young attorney has shown all of us a remarkable example of excellence." The courtroom responded with quiet applause, a sign of respect rather than mere admiration. Lawyers who had once doubted him nodded silently. Witnesses expressed subtle approval, and the audience showed their recognition in respectful, measured ways. The teenager, remaining humble, acknowledged the courtroom with a slight nod, his composure steady and unassuming. As the day progressed, the final matters of the case were resolved efficiently, guided by the teenager's careful analysis and strategic input. He ensured that every point was addressed, every argument considered, and every conclusion logically drawn. His professionalism and attention to detail were evident to everyone present. By the end of the trial, the teenager had not only represented his client effectively, but had elevated the entire courtroom experience into an exhibition of skill, intellect, and maturity. When the final proceedings concluded, the judge offered a formal statement of acknowledgement and respect. He praised the teenager for his brilliance, diligence, and the way he had navigated the trial with grace and intelligence. The courtroom staff, lawyers, and audience recognized the magnitude of what had been accomplished. They had witnessed the triumph of talent, preparation, and courage in a way that would be remembered long after the trial ended. The teenager packed his briefcase, carefully organizing his papers, and gave a respectful nod to the judge in the courtroom. There was no arrogance in his demeanor, only quiet confidence and humility. He had achieved not only a professional victory, but had also left a lasting impression on everyone present. His ability to command respect through skill, knowledge, and composure had redefined expectations and demonstrated that true talent can come from unexpected places. As he walked out of the courtroom, the whispers and conversations that had followed him over the past days now carried a tone of admiration and respect. Spectators discussed his brilliance, lawyers reflected on his strategy, and the judge considered the profound lesson in humility and perception he had learned. The teenager had not only won the trial, but had changed the way everyone in that courtroom thought about skill, intelligence, and potential. The day ended with a sense of closure and accomplishment. The teenager had faced skepticism, overcome doubt, demonstrated extraordinary legal skill, and emerged with respect and admiration. He had proven that age and appearance are not measures of ability, that preparation and intelligence define success, and that quiet confidence can inspire and transform perceptions. The courtroom and everyone within it had witnessed a rare and remarkable journey, one that would remain in memory as an example of excellence, humility, and the extraordinary potential of the human mind.